Welcome to the FlexPro YouTube channel. If this is your first time watching, be sure to subscribe. And as always, let us know your feedback in the comments and what you want to see next week. So this week we're answering a very simple question. What type of cardio is best? Is there actually an answer? We have two experts in this video who are going to break down the pros and cons of slow state cardio and high intensity interval training or HIIT cardio. So without further ado, let's jump into it.
What's up, guys? Redcon 1 head trainer Joe Bennett. Just giving you a little info on the topic of HIIT versus steady state. So specifically, one, just some info you could take away if you're just trying to get lean, but also really specifically geared towards competitors. There's a lot of pretty proven benefits to HIIT, meaning that there's proven that you're going to have more metabolic impact from it, meaning not just what calories are you burning when you're doing it, but what kind of impact you're going to have in your metabolic output the entire rest of the day. It's pretty definitive that research shows that you're going to have a much larger metabolic impact doing HIIT. There's also the thought process that HIIT will also correlate and translate to training performance a lot more. So meaning your HIIT training will help improve your endurance when you're actually doing your resistance training as well too. So what's really the concern? A lot of people think, you hear coaches say that, well, it's too taxing on recovery, it's too taxing on the central nervous system. In reality, there's nothing taxing on your central nervous system, and that's a fallacy altogether. As far as recovery goes, if you're doing the right type of HIIT, it shouldn't be that taxing on your recovery, and I'll elaborate a little bit. Pretty much the only rule that I'll say that you want to follow is what your glycogen levels are at. If you're in a very, very depleted state, glycogen levels are constantly being emptied, you're going through a lot of high and low days, or you're just very depleted for a long period of time, that may be one of the few cases where HIIT does not have merit. Or if your glycogen is so low that essentially you want to save it, and not deplete it and have it for your resistance training. So again, when that point comes is kind of different for everyone's prep. If you're cycling your carbs, it might be to the point where, well, after coming off of a high day, you might be able to do HIIT, and when you're coming into your lower days, you need to go a little bit more to steady state. So that's probably the biggest golden rule that you can kind of apply is just looking at glycogen levels, not necessarily recovery, not necessarily as, am I getting enough sleep or all the things that kind of go into the recovery component. Just more so, again, is do you or do you not have a lot of glycogen? As far as the recovery standpoint, if you're doing the right type of HIIT, it should not be taxing on your recovery. The right type of HIIT would be something called concentric only training or concentric only HIIT. Which is a cool name someone made up. If you understand the concentric and eccentric portion of an exercise, basically concentric if you're bench pressing is the way up, the eccentric is kind of that load or that impact type thing. So concentric only forms, probably the three most common versions or easiest versions that you can do anywhere would be some sort of spin bike, some sort of prowler or sled push, or some sort of high incline hill sprint. And all that means, if you think about a spin bike, you're constantly just pressing. It's just repetitive concentric. There's no impact or loading phase. The same thing with a prowler. It's just one step after another. There's really no impact as far as the load's concerned. You just plant a foot and you drive through concentrically. And same thing with a hill. You're stride up. You're not having any of your load. It's a stride up a hill, and then you're concentrically pulling your body up past that point. Why is that important? Well, one, the concentric portion of the exercise is the part that's the most energy expenditure. So again, even when you're bench pressing, it's a lot more energy expenditure on the way up than it is on the way down. So one, from an output standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, you want a lot of just concentric contractions over and over and over and over at a high level of intensity, and you're going to have huge bang for your buck for the amount of time that you're doing it. The other concern is the eccentric is the most damaging on the muscle. So literally, like the lowering phase, again, for that bench press analogy, is actually where you incur the most muscle damage, which when you're training is good. Obviously you want to focus on that with the resistance training. The idea is to grow muscle or put yourself in a place where you have the opportunity to grow muscle post-training. As far as HIIT's concerned, you don't want that. That's where it could be saying that it's hard or it's taxing on recovery. So again, an example is you might not want to just do like sprints on a treadmill or plyometrics or things like that, something where there is a lot of an eccentric phase and could be taxing on your muscles, could be taxing on your recovery. Then as far as how are you doing it, what duration are you doing it, what intensity are you doing it, ideally you want it as intense as possible and as short as possible. I say you really want to be hitting failure around 15 to 20 seconds. So meaning if you're on a spin bike, If you hit a sprint, you have the intensity cranked up and you're going as fast as you can, your legs should be no longer able to turn over those pedals for 15 or 20 seconds. It's not necessarily that doing it longer for that is bad and having a little bit more recovery bad. It's just that's going to have, again, the most bang for your buck for the time frame. And honestly, at that point in time, you get some of the benefits of like resistance training, where again, it's not going to be such a long duration thing that's just extended catabolic, a lot of cortisol being built up over time. And you can even have the possibility of a good hormone balance afterwards. So it's one of those things where you just have to know the concepts, you have to know the time and the place to apply it, and which is more beneficial when. As far as how often and how many intervals, in reality, that's something that can just change basically as you go through your prep. So it might be a variable that you progress or regress if it's a little bit too much, meaning maybe you have 3 or 4 or 5 intervals to start, and as you need more output, more of a caloric deficit, you just add or increase intervals. And then the only other component really to consider necessarily is what do you like? So when I say that, meaning some people, if you don't like it because it's hard, that's one thing. But some people just hate specific types of cardio. So this is knowing yourself and having good communication with your coach. There's no reason anyone has to do one specific thing. Again, I just listed 3 decent options as far as what you could do for HIIT. If there's one you prefer, stick with that. And then the same thing, steady state has a place. It's never really wrong to do steady state, especially if it's something you like. So honestly, one of the downfalls of steady state, if you're doing an elliptical at a moderate intensity for 60 minutes, or you're walking at a fast pace on a treadmill.
I want to help you understand how low intensity steady state cardio burns fat, because it's not bad, it's just a little bit slower at burning fat. What I'm going to do is teach you a process of efficiency, okay? So normally, when we're doing steady state cardio, our bodies are in a very efficient state. It's something called beta oxidation. It's a very efficient form of breaking down fats into energy. But efficiency isn't always what we want when we're trying to burn fat, when you think about it. We don't want the most efficient way to create energy. We kind of want an inefficient way, because that causes our bodies to have to adapt and thereby burn more energy and burn more fat and burn more calories and ultimately lose weight and change our bodies. However, beta oxidation and the utilization of fats is a very phenomenal, very interesting thing, and it does a lot for our bodies. So let's explain how it actually works so you have a solid understanding of how your body's literally using fats for fuel. So beta oxidation is simply where fatty acids are broken down into the mitochondria and ultimately broken down into coenzyme A, which we can ultimately use for energy. Coenzyme A is the root of creating energy in general. Okay, but let me tell you about how the fatty acids are transported and how this process works, and then it will all make a little bit more sense. So it starts with a fatty acid molecule that comes from dietary fats or whatever the case may be. These fatty acids conjugate with coenzyme A in what is called the cytosol. Okay, the cytosol is just the aqueous portion of a cell. If you visualize a cell and you look at a diagram of a cell, you'll see that there is a liquidy portion in the center of the cell. That is the cytosol. So what happens is the fatty acid conjugates with coenzyme A there, and it creates something known as fatty acid acyl coenzyme A. This fatty acid acyl coenzyme A is then modified by something that a lot of us know as carnitine. Maybe you've taken an L-carnitine supplement before and you've just believed that it helps you burn more fat. Well, now you'll probably understand how that actually works. The L-carnitine reacts with the fatty acid that's already been conjugated, and it carries it into the mitochondria. So that carnitine literally is a transporter to get it into the inner membrane of the mitochondria where we create energy. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of a cell where we create energy. So it goes from being inside a cell in the cytosol, crosses through the membrane of the mitochondria to where it can start being utilized for energy. But now we have to understand how that process actually works. So I want you to visualize the fatty acid breakdown like a March Madness bracket or like a sports betting bracket or something like that. So you end up having this long chain fatty acid. This long chain fatty acid that's inside your mitochondria, and it starts breaking down. It breaks down through dehydrogenation. So it means that hydrogen molecules are removed. Those hydrogen molecules are removed and water is added in. Then this cleaving process occurs. So you've got this fatty acid that's been modified a little bit, and then a portion of it gets cleaved off. The end of the fatty acid gets cleaved off, making a shorter fatty acid. That fatty acid goes to the top of the cycle and starts the process again, where hydrogens are removed, water is added, and a portion cleaved off becomes even smaller. And then it goes through the process again until there's nothing left but acetyl coenzyme A. So when I reference it like a sports bracket, it literally is like that. It starts like a total wide funnel at the top, breaks down more, breaks down more, breaks down more until you're left with nothing but acetyl coenzyme A, which is pure energy. And this process is very unique, and it obviously involves oxidation, where it requires oxygen, it requires dehydrogenase to remove hydrogen. Very complex process, yet it yields a lot of energy. So now I'm going to explain how this works when it comes down to steady state cardio. So many people will bag on steady state cardio because they think you're going to burn a lot of muscle and everything like that. Well, the thing is, steady state cardio predominantly uses fats as a source of fuel, because as you can tell when I'm explaining this process, it takes a long time to create energy. It's slow. It breaks down fatty acids in a slow way, but it ends up creating over 100 ATP every time it goes through this process. Whereas when we're utilizing carbs as a source of fuel, we're only creating 36 ATP. Now, in case you don't know, ATP is literally just another word for energy. It's adenosine triphosphate. It's basically the root of energy in your body. It is energy, okay? So we create 100 units of energy through beta oxidation from fat, and we create 36 units of energy from ATP through glucose metabolism. So you can start doing the math. You can see, yes, you could potentially burn more fat because you're gonna have to work harder to create more ATP with carbohydrates. With fat as a source of fuel, your body runs efficiently. So that's the caveat. With low intensity cardio, you have a direct line to utilizing fats. You're going to utilize fats, but your body's gonna utilize them a little bit slower. With anaerobic activity, where you use carbs, your body's gonna have to work harder, it's inefficient, it hurts more, but you do burn more calories, not necessarily more fat, but more calories, because you have to work harder. You have to work 3 times as hard. So I hope that makes some sense, but when you look at the big picture, that is how low intensity cardio helps you burn fat. It's not a bad thing, okay? Only if you go to the extreme. I'm always a fan of both high intensity and low intensity, but it all depends on the situation.
Well, we hope that answers some questions on which cardio is best for you. As you can tell, both have a place and both have pros and cons. But when it comes down to it, it's about how sustainable is that cardio for your lifestyle. Because at the end of the day, if you can't do it for the rest of your life, it's simply a quick fix. We hope that answers everything, and let us know down below what you want to see next. Have an absolutely amazing week.